TikTokers Who Did Terrible Things, Episode 24. Mohamed Al-Abboud, otherwise known as Mohamed Al-Abboud 25 on TikTok. Creator class type, internet gangster. Specialty, fake it till you make it. Claim to fame, straight up murder. So I'm not gonna lie to you, this one is a little unorthodox. Reason being is that even after the individuals in question had been sentenced, the so-called facts about this case presented by many news organizations deviated greatly to what was actually uncovered during the course of the trial. That being said, we've pieced together a version of this story using facts presented in court during the date of sentencing. Let's begin. Well, this 28-year-old TikToker out of Romania began posting on the platform back in 2019. With that, most of his content involved himself just posting completely random videos of things he thought were funny. But I think we all know by now this really isn't why you're here. And believe me, I 100% get it. However, there's a few things about his background we need to understand before moving forward. You see, he had been living a relatively simple life as a delivery driver for a restaurant out of London, doing all the normal things you would expect of a mid to late 20s bachelor to be doing. But there was one thing he, along with his friend Kusai Al-Jundi, wanted more than anything in the world. That was money and power, but more so, they didn't really want to have to work for it. With that in mind, one day, while working in that restaurant, a fairly wealthy and well-known businesswoman by the name of Louise Kam walks in with a few of her friends. And well, Kusai ultimately takes note of this, walks over and introduces himself. He's like, "Hey, look, my name is Kusai, and I'm well aware you have multiple properties around the area. You know, my wealthy girlfriend, she's extremely wealthy. We may be willing to pay you top dollar for those properties." Now, it's important to note, we're not talking a few £100,000. We're talking a deal in excess of $2 million. In addition to this, Louise had been working towards a specific goal for quite some time. That is, selling off all of her rental properties and purchasing 2 homes, one for each of her now grown children. And here's where things start to take a turn for the worse for Miss Kam. You see, Kusai did not have the backing of a wealthy girlfriend whatsoever, nor did he actually have any assets of his own. In addition to this, when discussing this deal, Al-Jundi essentially tells Miss Kam the following: "Look, I'm willing to pay you much more than market value for these properties under one condition. We do this by way of gifting. This way we can avoid any of the taxes or stamp duties on the transfer itself. And although yes, I'd be spending more, I would actually be spending less, and you wouldn't have to pay any taxes either. And once everything's been transferred, I'll give you your money." And unfortunately, despite the giant red flag quite literally sitting in front of Miss Kam's face, along with several warnings from friends and family, she ultimately bit off on this deal. It was at this point Kusai began the process of seeking out a lawyer to draw up the documents required for this deal. And when informing them what he wanted them to do, not one, not 2, but 3 different solicitors straight up told him, "Hell no. This is one of the shadiest deals we've ever seen. I am literally not gonna do that." While another one stated, "All right, well, I'm willing to do it, but Miss Kam is gonna need her own separate legal representation, and they're gonna need to be involved. This deal poses a great risk to her personally, so by all means, if you can get her lawyer involved and her involved, well, work together and make sure everyone's protected." Some of them would even have to tell Kusai that it wasn't just as simple as giving you a document for you to take off, have her sign, and just bring it back to us. This needs to be handled carefully. And here's the real kicker about all these consultations he had been going to try and get the deal worked out. Obviously, lawyers cost money. Kusai had managed to convince Louise to pay for these consultations on his behalf, to the point where Miss Kam's bank figures out sort of what's going on. Suspecting fraud, they inform Louise that all future transfers from her account to his have been stopped, to which Kusai, finding out about this, instructs Louise to lie to her bank so that it wouldn't happen again. Once again, Miss Kam completely obliges, ignoring the now multiple red flags that have been ringing out the entire time, quite literally every single step of the way. And shortly thereafter, Al-Jundi was able to convince Miss Kam to sign over power of attorney, thus allowing him to sign the properties over to himself. And by now, I'm sure a few of you are wondering, look, you told us this guy's name was Muhammad. Now you're going on about some guy named Al-Jundi, Kusai. I have no idea what you're talking about. And look, I get it, but this is ultimately where his role begins. You see, immediately upon these transfer papers being signed over, Muhammad moves into one of those 2 homes and begins treating it as his own, like straight up flexing on everything inside this woman's house. I mean, hell, even Kusai would go as far as to tell his parents Miss Kam left him as the sole beneficiary to her will. But this was merely a cover story for what was about to happen next. By January 24th of 2021, he had gone ahead and purchased a fireplace to be installed within a couple of days, and by January 25th, the pair had devised a plan to take Miss Kam's life. The following day, at around 3 p.m., Kusai lures her to the house in question, under the guise that she's going to be meeting one of his solicitors in order to close the deal once and for all. He then drives off with his girlfriend to create an alibi, leaving Mohamed all alone inside that house. And when she enters and walks up into the living room, Mohamed sneaks up behind her with a hairdryer and proceeds to strangle her with the power cable, in what was said to be one hell of a 40-second struggle. Just a short while later, Kusai's girlfriend swings back to the house alone to pick up Mohamed. This was under the pretext she would be unknowingly creating an alibi for him as well. Essentially, what I'm trying to tell you is she wasn't in on the loop. She had no idea the pair was about to take Miss Kam's life, and even so, Mohamed not only immediately confesses to the crime, but he would go into great detail about how he had done so, all in a statement that would later be used against him in the court of law. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. After a few hours of being out and about, he is then dropped back off at that house, at which point he proceeded to film a now deleted TikTok of himself flexing everything in the woman's home right next to her dead body. And although she was never actually seen on camera in this video, it wasn't until the next day that Kusai would show up and they would wrap her up in sheets, take her out the front door, where they are caught on camera carrying her lifeless body and dumping it into a trash bin outside of the house. And then if we fast forward just a few hours later, Mohamed filmed this video in her driveway just yards away from that very same trash can. In addition to this, Mohamed would then sell Miss Kam's BMW to an unsuspecting buyer. And it was around this time the pair began to implement their genius strategy at getting away with murder. That is, texting various friends and family of Miss Kam acting like they were her, informing them that Louise had scammed them out of millions of dollars and had fled back to China, but also to have no fear and they didn't need to come looking for her. Well, needless to say, not a single one of these people actually believed a word they had been texting through her phone. And realizing the heat is on, they then move her body to a different location while keeping it in that very same trash can, essentially placing it amongst a bunch of other bins on a different street that had the very same number, all in an attempt to have waste management come by and unknowingly dispose of the body. Shortly thereafter, Mohamed and Kusai are both picked up and questioned by police, at which point they give them that very same story they had been giving to Miss Kam's family, that she had ran off to China after scamming them out of millions and millions of dollars, not realizing police would just seize the bank statements of anybody involved in this so-called transaction. And surprise, surprise, not only did they never find any large sums of money in Kusai's account, there were several points throughout the year he didn't even have 15 cents. Upon further investigation, they would discover not only had Miss Kam's phone never left the country, as a matter of fact, every single one of those messages had been sent from nowhere other than her very own house. And as time went on, more and more evidence just began to pile up on top of everything these two had done, a list of which included but was not limited to the video of them carrying her body out, but also every single one of those TikToks Mohamed had filmed prior and after the murder itself. Moreover, many of the pair's very own friends and family would essentially rat them out without even knowing they were doing so. This was mainly due to the fact their web of lies had become so vast and so great, everything eventually just caught up. And if we fast forward all the way up to January 19th of 2023, they were finally convicted of the murder of 71-year-old Louise Kam. And on February 1st, they were both sentenced to 30 years apiece for their participation in this crime. So that's it, y'all. That is going to do it for this episode. For those of you who made it this far, I'd just like to say the following. There was a reason this video took us so long to put out, and that's mainly due to the fact that after about a week of research, no matter how we tried to tell this story, there were going to be discrepancies across the board unless we used a single source, which is when we ultimately decided to use footage of the sentencing in and of itself. And for those of you who are interested in watching the sentencing, it's about 20 minutes long and we are leaving it in the description below. With that, I sincerely hope you have an amazing whatever it is, wherever you may be. Peace out.